After so many decades of unknowing, this finding finally brings closure and a truth to a wound that never healed.
October 22nd, 1962. A small Pennsylvania town, a Catholic church, and a 9-year-old girl who just wanted to say a quick prayer before meeting her friends at the library. What happened in that choir loft would haunt an entire community for over 6 decades. Carol Ann Dougherty's father found her there, beaten, strangled, her small body lying beneath a stained glass window. And the man who did it? He walked away, got married, had a family, and kept destroying lives for 40 more years. This is the story of how a monster hid in plain sight, and how justice finally caught up to him, even from beyond the grave. Okay, so let me set the scene for you. We're talking about Bristol Borough, Pennsylvania, this tiny town just outside Philadelphia. And back in 1962, this was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody. Kids rode their bikes everywhere. Parents didn't worry. Churches didn't lock their doors. It was a different time, you know? October 22nd, 1962 was a Monday. Just a regular fall day. Kids were in school, leaves were changing, life was normal, and for 9-year-old Carol Ann Dougherty, it should have been just another afternoon. Carol Ann was a 5th grader. By all accounts, she was this sweet, happy kid who loved reading mystery books, which honestly makes what happened even more heartbreaking. She was devout too, the kind of kid who actually listened when the nuns told her to stop and pray. That day, she was headed to the Bristol Borough Free Library to return 2 books and pick up the next one in her favorite mystery series. She hopped on her bike, stopped at Tommy's store on Farragut Avenue to grab a Coke and some penny candy. Because again, it's 1962, and that's what kids did. And then she headed down Lincoln Avenue. And here's where everything goes wrong. Let me tell you about Carol Ann's family real quick. Because this matters, she had a younger sister, Kay, who was only 3 years old at the time. Kay would grow up never really knowing her big sister, but living her entire life in the shadow of what happened to her, their parents. I can't even imagine. You send your kid out on her bike on a Monday afternoon, and she just doesn't come home. When Carol Ann didn't show up for dinner, her parents started to worry. This wasn't like her. She was a good kid, responsible, so they went looking. Her dad noticed her bike outside St. Mark's Roman Catholic Church. And guys, he went inside. Stay with me here because this part is rough. He found his daughter in the choir loft. She'd been beaten, strangled with something, a ligature, they'd later determine. Partially clothed, she was lying under a stained glass window. District Attorney Jennifer Shorn would say decades later, and this just stops you cold. We believe it may be the only rape and murder of a little girl in a church in the United States. The news absolutely rocked this small town. Papers ran photos of a gurney being carried down the church steps. Carol Ann's body covered in a white sheet. Can you imagine? This is a place where nothing happens. And suddenly every parent's worst nightmare is playing out in real time. People were terrified, angry, demanding answers. And the police, they were determined to find whoever did this. So the cops immediately start working the case. They're interviewing witnesses, collecting evidence, doing everything they can. And they actually get some decent leads pretty quickly. They found Lucky Strike cigarettes at the scene. They recovered hair, specifically a pubic hair, from Carol Ann's clenched fist. Yeah, she fought back. This tiny 9-year-old girl fought her attacker. Initially, investigators looked at 3 guys. Frank Zucchero, Wayne Roach, and get this, Father Joseph Sabadish, the actual pastor of St. Mark's Church. Now here's where things get weird. All 3 of these guys, they had alibis that checked out. They were cleared, so the investigation kind of stalls out for a bit, but then, about 2 months after the murder, someone calls in a tip. A citizen calls the police and says there's this guy, William Schrader, who's been acting really strange. Like suspiciously strange. He'd been cutting through people's backyards, acting paranoid, just off. Other witnesses came forward too, saying they'd seen a man matching Schrader's description near the church that day, and not just near it, looking suspicious, possibly like he had just killed someone. Yeah, those were the actual words used. So who is William Schrader? Well, buckle up, because this guy's story is dark from the very beginning. He lived just a block and a half from St. Mark's Church on Lincoln Avenue. He was 20 years old at the time of Carol Ann's murder. And guys, this dude had been violent basically his entire life. We're talking about a kid who, at age 8, was already known for assaulting young girls, clubbing them in the face. He spent years bouncing in and out of reform schools. At 17, he enlisted in the army. Probably thought he could straighten himself out. Or maybe he was just running from his problems. Either way, that lasted all of 1 year before he was dishonorably discharged. Shortly after that, he shot a man, got convicted of attempted murder, and did time at Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. You know, that creepy old prison that's now a museum. So yeah, when he gets out, where does he end up? Bristol, Pennsylvania, living on Lincoln Avenue, right where Carol Ann Dougherty rode her bike that October day. District Attorney Schrader put it perfectly. Unbeknownst to Carol Ann, and unbeknownst to everyone in Bristol Borough, living on Lincoln Avenue was an absolute predator. A predator whose prey was little girls, and that was William Schrader. So the police bring Schrader in for questioning, and right away things aren't adding up. He gives them an alibi, says he was at work, but they check his time cards. He wasn't at work. He lied. Then they give him a polygraph test. And guess what? He fails it, spectacularly. They also take a pubic hair sample from him, which, remember, they have one clutched in Carol Ann's hand from the crime scene. They also found those Lucky Strike cigarettes at the scene. Turns out, that's the brand Schrader smoked. So you're thinking, okay, they got him, right? Open and shut case? Not quite. Here's the thing about 1962. Forensic science wasn't what it is today. They couldn't just run DNA tests. They had circumstantial evidence, but not enough for a conviction, and Schrader knew he was a suspect. So what does he do? He bolts, just leaves Pennsylvania completely and heads south, first to Florida, then Texas, then eventually Louisiana. And guys, this is where the story gets even darker, because Schrader didn't just run away and live a quiet life. Oh no, he kept doing what he'd always done. He was a serial predator, and he left a trail of destruction everywhere he went. So Schrader ends up in Louisiana, and he gets married to a woman named Audrey. She had daughters, disabled daughters. And Schrader, God, this is hard to even say, he sexually assaulted them, repeatedly. The couple also fostered 2 young girls. Schrader assaulted them too. District Attorney Schrader said it best. The generational sexual abuse that this man inflicted upon every female child and woman in his life, he didn't stop until the day he died. Investigators later determined that Schrader had sexually abused nearly every female child he ever lived with or had access to. We're talking about his own biological daughter, his granddaughters, girls between the ages of 6 and 13. He also assaulted 2 adult women who had cognitive delays and couldn't consent. This guy was a monster. But wait, there's more. Because in 1970, 8 years after Carol Ann's murder, Schrader does something that finally puts him behind bars. It's Halloween. He's living with his wife Audrey and the foster kids in Louisiana. They get into an argument and Audrey kicks him out of the house. As he's gathering his stuff, Schrader says, and I quote, that he's going to burn the house down and kill all the bitches inside it. And he actually does it. He comes back and sets the house on fire, intentionally, knowing that his wife and the children are inside. One of the foster children, 12-year-old Catherine Smith, dies trying to protect her sister. Schrader gets convicted of manslaughter and arson. He's sentenced to 21 years in prison. So he killed at least 2 little girls that we know of, Carol Ann in 1962 and Catherine in 1970. And honestly, there could be more. We'll probably never know the full extent of his crimes. Back in Pennsylvania, Carol Ann's case never really went away. The evidence sat in an attic in a municipal building, just sitting there through decades of temperature changes, deteriorating. But investigators never forgot about her. In the 1990s, about 30 years after the murder, they decided to test that pubic hair they'd recovered from Carol Ann's hand. Technology had improved a bit by then. The results showed significant similarities between the hair in Carol Ann's hand and the sample they'd taken from Schrader back in 1962. Over the course of the investigation, they tested 141 different pubic hair samples. 141. Every other person was eliminated, except William Schrader. In 1992, the Bucks County Courier-Times ran this big series called Murder in a Choir Loft. It brought the case back into the public eye and put pressure on investigators to take another look. They actually extradited Schrader from Louisiana back to Pennsylvania for questioning, brought him before a grand jury, and you know what he did? Took the Fifth refused to answer any questions about Carol Ann Dougherty's murder. They couldn't charge him, didn't have enough to make it stick. So he went back to Louisiana to finish his sentence. Meanwhile, Carol Ann's parents were getting older, waiting, hoping for answers that never came. They both died without ever knowing who killed their daughter. Let that sink in for a second. July 2002. William Schrader is still in prison in Louisiana. He's 62 years old, and honestly, he's lived way longer than he deserved to. He has a heart attack and dies. And back in Pennsylvania, the Dougherty family still doesn't have answers. Here's a crazy detail. Mike's uncle, Vincent Faragalli, was the police chief at the time of the murder, and he kept Carol Ann's picture on his bureau for the rest of his life, never forgot her. The renewed attention, combined with advances in DNA technology, led investigators to submit evidence to Othram Labs in the Woodlands, Texas. These guys specialize in cold cases and have this amazing new technology that can pull DNA from basically nothing. There was also another lab in California called Astrea that had successfully identified a 4-year-old boy who'd been murdered in 1972 using roughly 2 millimeters of hair. So there was hope. Even though the evidence had been sitting in an attic for decades, degrading with temperature changes, maybe, just maybe, they could finally get answers. And then, in fall of 2024, something incredible happens. Remember how Schrader died in 2002? Well, he had a stepson. Guy named Robert LeBlanc comes forward and tells investigators that before Schrader died, the old man confessed to him, not once, but twice. Schrader told LeBlanc that he had murdered a little girl in a Catholic church in Pennsylvania. He said he lured Carol Ann inside, raped her, and then, and I'm quoting here, he had to kill the girl in Bristol to keep her from talking. He confessed he actually confessed. But wait, there's more to this story. There was also another guy, someone Schrader met in prison back in the 1960s, who told his parole officer that shortly before Schrader died, Schrader had bragged about committing the perfect murder. Said he'd raped the girl on the altar before killing her to keep her quiet. This parole officer told Bucks County authorities, and when they tracked down LeBlanc to verify the story, he confirmed everything. Now, LeBlanc has since passed away too, but before he died, he gave a detailed statement, and he was emphatic about what Schrader had told him. The details matched. Things that were never made public, things only the killer would know. So now they've got the confession, but they still need physical evidence, right? They need that final piece. They send the hair sample, the one from Carol Ann's hand, to be retested with modern technology. And this time, they can actually build a DNA profile. The results come back. It's a match. William Schrader's DNA matches the hair that 9-year-old Carol Ann Dougherty clutched in her hand as she fought for her life in that church choir loft. So now investigators have eyewitness accounts placing Schrader near the church, his failed polygraph, his false alibi, the cigarettes matching his brand, the DNA match in 2 separate confessions he made before he died. In 2025, a Bucks County grand jury reviews all of this evidence. They produce a 53-page report. Their conclusion? Quote, "The investigation only allows the conclusion that William Schrader raped and murdered Carol Ann Dougherty. On October 29, 2025, just 7 days after the 63rd anniversary of Carol Ann's murder, District Attorney Jennifer Shorn holds a press conference. For more than 6 decades, this tragic case has haunted the community and inflicted unimaginable pain on Carol Ann's family," Shorn says. While Schrader passed away, she wipes away tears. After so many decades of unknowing, this finding finally brings closure and a truth to a wound that never healed.
Nothing can bring Carol back. We can finally let her rest in peace, knowing that her story has been told, her truth revealed, and her memory honored.
She specifically thanks the journalists and podcasters who kept the story alive, the investigators who never gave up, the modern technology that finally gave them answers. Bristol Borough Police Chief Joe Moore.
Unbeknownst to Carol Ann and unbeknownst to everyone in Bristol Borough, living on Lincoln Avenue was an absolute predator. And a predator who his prey was little girls. And that is William Schrader. 2 separate occasions, William Schrader admitted to him that he had done this and got away with it. And they interviewed. So the generational sexual abuse that this man inflicted upon every female, child, and woman in his life, he didn't stop until the day he died.
This case has haunted the Bristol Borough community for years. Their pursuit of the truth finally delivered. So here we are, 63 years later. The mystery of who killed Carol Ann Dougherty in that church choir loft is finally solved. But let's talk about the bigger picture here for a second. Carol Ann was 9 years old. She loved reading mystery books, which is almost too ironic. She stopped to say a prayer because that's what she'd been taught to do. She was doing everything right, and she ran into a monster. William Schrader destroyed so many lives, Carol Ann, Catherine Smith, his own family members, countless girls who survived his abuse but had to live with that trauma forever. And he got away with it for so long because he kept moving, because forensic science wasn't advanced enough, because people didn't talk about sexual abuse the way we do now. But here's the thing that gives me hope. They got him eventually. Technology caught up. Someone came forward. The truth came out. Justice took 63 years, but it came. Carol Ann's parents never got to see this day. They died still wondering, still hurting, still living with that open wound. And that's the tragedy within the tragedy, isn't it? But Kay, little 3-year-old Kay, who barely remembers her sister, she got answers. She got closure. She got to hear her sister's killer named publicly and definitively. And the community of Bristol Borough, they can finally close this dark chapter. They don't have to wonder anymore who walked among them, who lived on their streets, who killed one of their own. I think about Carol Ann sometimes, about what she might have become. She loved mysteries. Maybe she would have become a detective or a writer, maybe a librarian. Given how much she loved those trips to the library, we'll never know. What we do know is that she fought back, that she left evidence, that she clutched that hair in her hand, evidence that, decades later, would finally identify her killer. Even in death, Carol Ann helped solve her own case. How's that for a mystery ending? This case shows us a few things. It shows us that cold cases can be solved. Even after 60+ years, it shows us that technology keeps evolving, and evidence that couldn't be used before might be the key later on. It shows us that people care, investigators, journalists, podcasters, and they don't forget. And maybe most importantly, it shows us that sometimes, even when the person responsible dies before they can face justice in court, the truth still matters. Naming them matters. Giving families closure matters. William Schrader died in 2002 without ever being convicted of Carol Ann's murder. But now, 22 years after his death, everyone knows what he did. Everyone knows he was a monster. His name is tied to his crimes forever. And Carol Ann Dougherty, she's remembered not just as a victim, but as a little girl who loved books and Coke and penny candy, who said her prayers, who fought back against evil. Her story has been told, her truth has been revealed, and she can finally rest in peace.
Devastating act changed my family's life forever. Though nothing can bring Carol back, we can finally let her rest in peace.
Thanks for watching. If this case affected you like it affected me, please do well to subscribe and leave a comment below. And if you know of any other cold cases that deserve attention, let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And hey, hug your loved ones today. You never know. I'll see you in the next one.